The entrance is right there.
Dad, these are public school kids. I'm not showing up for the field trip and the rolls.
We all wear masks. It's an unavoidable aspect of being human because it takes two to build an identity. Our actions and interactions need to be received for us to understand who we are. And the moment Harry Osborn is introduced, we see his mask. He is a rich dude who tries his best to appear as someone normal. He is a character who has attention in his identity because of this paradox.
What, you want me to trade in my car for a Jetta just because you flunked out of every private school I ever sent you to?
One of the defining creative features of Spider-Man is the character's placement in his social hierarchy. He's the unpopular kid who lives in the periphery in every moment. But what about the unremarkable guy's friend? As a supporting character, Harry Osborn is used as a highlighter for the themes that are embodied by Peter Parker. The key concept of identity. Now, I'm going to be honest up front, a lot of this examination is coming from a place of deep nostalgia because despite James Franco's odd stoner-like performance and the strange deliveries he has,
I swear on my father's grave, Spider-Man will pay.
Harry Osborn was a character I was deeply attached to as a kid, because even though Peter Parker was written to be relatable by being unremarkable, he's still the hero, and as a kid I often connected myself more with the other guy, to the fact that I still own his 5-inch action figure. If there's one pattern that goes through Harry's journey, it's the theme of managing impressions. He's a character innately preoccupied with trying to control his own identity, while often struggling to be honest with himself. He's a character torn between what he's inherited and what he strives to be.
This girl is important to me.
Harry, please, look at her.
You think a woman like that's sniffing around because she likes your personality? What are you saying?
There's a dude called Erving Goffman, and he suggested that human identities exist as a result of how we try to manage the impressions we give to others in our day-to-day interactions, to the extent that social interactions is similar to a theatrical performance, because maintaining these impressions are so deeply embedded in our interpersonal behaviors. As I quote from his book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, life itself is a dramatically enacted thing. This idea can be broken down into 6 elements, which I'm going to be using to deconstruct Harry's journey. So brace yourselves, this is going to get a bit boring. The persona is the element that is defined by the masks we wear. Specifically, it is the variations on the self that we select for which situations fit the role.
Leave him alone.
Or what? Or his father will fire your father. What's Daddy gonna do? Sue me?
Harry doesn't want to behave nor appear as a wealthy son to a wealthy business dude. He would rather conceal his wealth because the only persona he wants is the appearance of an average normal person subject to ordinary humble pressures, such as being bullied alongside his best friend and approaching the attractive girl in school without flaunting his wealth.
Combining the genetic information.
But at the same time, Harry's persona is deeply shaped by the comparisons with his best friend. Norman Osborn likes Peter Parker more than his own son because, in large part, Peter has inherited his uncle's working-class, productive and earnest spirit. He's too humble to accept a job he didn't earn.
I'll make a few calls.
No, I couldn't accept it, sir. I like to earn what I get. I can find my own work.
I respect that. You want to make it on your own steam. That's great.
So despite Harry's love for his best friend, there's an inherent gap between them because of his sense of inadequacy. He tries to fill it with MJ, someone he and Peter Parker are sexually attracted to, but something is always wrong, and this is signified thematically by the meaning from his performance. Not James Franco's performance, I mean performance in terms of identification. The performance is the way the masks are worn. Is it sincere or cynical? Even though Harry presents himself in a more humble way, it still lacks a bit of honesty because he's trying to exhibit himself in an unavoidably inauthentic way. He loves MJ, but she doesn't reflect any truth back to him because he's not providing any with his performance. And the consequences of this appears during the Thanksgiving scene, where he would rather side with his father than the girl he loves in the heat of the moment. Harry is someone who can't escape his own nature.
Everyone heard that creep.
The creep is my father, alright? If I'm lucky, I'll become half of what he is. So just keep your mouth shut about stuff you don't understand.
Because despite striving for the warm, honest and humble world that MJ, Peter Parker and Aunt May inhabits, it's not honest to who he is. And this is all torn down when school finishes and he can't be in a humble, ordinary environment, from seeing how MJ clearly wants to bang Peter Parker more than him, and even more importantly, when his father dies, every environmental and social aspect of his life that had previously positively maintained him is gone. The only thing that's left is a lonely boy becoming a man with no direction than an angry oath.
One day Spider-Man will pay.
Harry Osborn and Peter Parker effectively have opposing arcs in Spider-Man 1. Peter Parker, despite having a resentful moment with his loving uncle, he's still successful in inheriting his Uncle Ben's values while creating his own identity. Harry loves his father, who for the most part seems to be completely irreverent with him most of the time, and then Harry struggles and fails in carving his own path. Peter Parker confidently knows who he is. Harry only has an idea, so they diverge radically in life, starting with the stage. The stage is the context of the communication, and this is the way our self-presentation is set. One of the last moments we have of the old Harry is when he's in Aunt May's house during Peter Parker's birthday. From here on out, all the stages are business related. He helps Dr. Octavius with his experiment in hopes for fame and fortune.
Good luck tomorrow, Otto.
Nobel Prize.
We'll see you in Sweden!
And when it fails, he puts on his sunglasses, which shows that he looks at reality with a filter now, and this filters both his obsession with Spider-Man but also his sense of powerlessness. All his humility has decayed with time, and this is exposed in his drunken explosion with Peter Parker during the gala.
You stole MJ from me. You stole my father's love. And you let him die because you didn't turn in the freak.
And this brings me to the importance of the role. Roles is the essence of Goffman's model. The parts we play are the organizing principles of self-presentation. We move from role to role across the day. We express ourselves differently depending on what is contextually expected of us. Harry's love for MJ was representative of his humility, but now she's off to marry someone else, so the role of being a lover is gone. He pushes Peter Parker away, so he's lost his role as a friend. So now Harry's role as a son and businessman has turned him into a monument of what his nature had determined. He's only half the man his father was, filled with arrogant hatred and vanity. But suddenly this is also torn up when he finds out that Spider-Man was Peter Parker the whole time. The evil he demonized in his mind was his best friend, the last part of him that wasn't lost in time. Originally Harry chooses friendship, but ultimately destiny catches up to him.
Avenge me! No!
Harry Osborn rebuilds himself, and in Spider-Man 3 he now smoothly wears a different persona, the mask of the Green Goblin, but now snowboarder style. He is only defined by what he hates and doesn't have, so he's a character trapped with no future because he's trying to impress a dead man.
Tell it to my father. Raise him from the dead.
And as expected, immediately into the story he gets his ass chunked by Spider-Man and loses his memories. Oddly enough, with amnesia, Harry is a better person. He assembles his life in a way that returns him to his humble aspirations.
You have lovely friends.
My best friends.
His naturally dishonest but yet humble performance comes back, and more importantly, he returns to his role as a friend, which highlights the importance of teams. Teams is the company that we keep, the friendships and fellow actors that reinforce how our identities perform. Harry Osborn, Peter Parker, and Mary Jane are the only social circle that's focused on in the original trilogy, and as a result, every character are incredibly lonely and reflects off each other. Harry can't help but love Mary Jane because it's only with her that he can solve his paradox. She is the honest, humble, warm light that lights up his cold, empty mansion. And this realization that it can't work again collapses the social team he's in. It's what triggers the return of his old memories. So once again, he plots to destroy Peter Parker.
How's the pie?
So good.
Personal style is the way we as individuals adapt to our roles. It's the creative function of communication that we can't help but to imprint onto. Similar to his father, Harry's style is to indulge in his destructive power. He's inherited the same strategies from how Norman terrorized Peter, but the difference is that Harry does it without a mask. Because the role of being his father's son is the mask.
Strawberries.
And the big final blowout that happens is in his father's laboratory. This is important because symbolically it highlights that the only materials Harry had to develop his sense of personal style and sense of self comes from the ugly investments from his father. So Harry's denial of his friendship in exchange for his blind love for his father has turned him into a weapon like any other object in his father's arsenal. So it's poetic that he gets his face burned by a pumpkin bomb, and specifically the side of his face that's always in shadow when he's looking at the camera with an evil, exaggerated expression. And that's all 6 components of Erving Goffman's dramaturgical framework, and it maps out, I think, quite nicely the subtle complexities in Harry's journey. This is a story about a good man fighting his nature, but can't because he's placed all his attention in managing himself with an unattainable impression. First it was an identity that wasn't his, then an identity that he can't be. But what about the end of his character? Surely there's a happier ending than failure for him, right? Right?
He loved me.
No. He despised you. You were an embarrassment to him.
When Sandman and Venom kidnap Mary Jane, Peter Parker is left outnumbered, so he seeks out the help of his best friend and is originally rejected. Harry's revenge has failed and he's left scarred from it all. And he's left with the one feeling that he can count on, his rejection of everyone. In the edited cut, he looks at the picture of the old gang, and in the theatrical cut, his butler comes out of frickin' nowhere to exposit what really happened to his father.
The blade that pierced his body came from your glider.
No, his glider.
But the point is, Harry has his identity reflected back to him. The one thing that was never a lie was the love of his friends. That's how his story started, that's where he left, that eventually caused his downfall, but they were still there for him. It's a continuity that is more real than the impression he has of his father's honor. So he chooses to save his best friend, and I'm not gonna lie, my hair stands up every time Harry arrives to help Spider-Man. Even though it's kinda goofy and the quippy interactions are a bit oddly exaggerated, but this is the first time Peter Parker and Harry Osborn exist as equals.
Am I interrupting?
The gap that's in Harry's identity is finally closed, which is shown when he helps Peter save Mary Jane. This is someone who knows who he is and doesn't seek to impersonate anything. And like his father, he dies by being stabbed by his own glider, in the same way that Norman Osborn's plan of ramming the glider at Peter Parker was a self-destructive act regardless. If Spider-Man didn't do the backflip, Norman still would have ended up like a shish kebab. Harry's death, like his father, also came from a self-destructive impulse, because Harry's expression after being stabbed was a surprise. And I think that's oddly beautiful. He didn't think he had it in him. He's a good man and he didn't even know it. He spent so much of his life managing an impression that the being that he was underneath it all was someone even mightier than the friend that he felt inadequate next to. So when he dies on an incomplete construction site, he ironically is a completed person. Earlier when Harry pursued Peter with vengeance, he nearly died, and the only person that was there for him was a friend that he considered an enemy. But when Harry went to Peter Parker with love, when he actually dies, he's surrounded by his friends that he genuinely loves back. In the eyes of the woman he loved, he died a better man. He returns back to the people who was always there for him. Which means he finally returned home.